Hey, everybody, Dr. Grant here. And today we are going to be talking about why dopamine is not the real ADHD problem. For doing this for over the past 10 years, working with adults with ADHD and running several different lab tests to identify the root of the problem, I have found that dopamine isn't really the real problem. There's so many other things that can be contributing to your ADHD situation. And so I want you to feast your eyes on this graph right here, because we're going to be spending quite a bit of time on this training specifically of what else is contributing to your ADHD situation than just dopamine. So obviously dopamine is a factor, but if you look at this, there are several different things that are missed when it comes to it being a dopamine problem. GABA, glutamine, norepinephrine, phenylethylamine, serotonin, 5-HTP, tryptophan, all sorts of different things. It's not just this right here. Okay, that's what I want you guys to understand, that there can be several indications, and this is only just one factor that could be contributing to your ADHD situation. So I want you to look at this case study of a patient I had when we ran all the different neurotransmitter tests, and you could see that they were clearly low in everything and not just dopamine. Now, they were taking medication, they were on Ritalin, and it still was not enough to help improve their dopamine levels or their norepinephrine levels. They're all still low. Why is that? Well, if you look at this, they're low on so many other things that it makes it very difficult to make enough dopamine, to build and modulate enough dopamine. Because if we go back here, remember, there are so many other things that can be contributing to dopamine. Okay, I know I'm a little scribbly here today, but you get the idea. Hopefully you get the idea is that there's so much more than just dopamine, that there's other things that contribute to dopamine, but other different neurotransmitters that also can come into play in this situation. So it requires investigating what is truly the problem and then fixing it from there. Now, another thing that could be also contributing to this, we're going back to this graph, is if we look at serotonin, GABA, and dopamine, what if they're elevated? You'd probably ask, like, well, isn't that not a problem? That's what we want. We want more dopamine, serotonin, GABA. Yes, in adequate balance. But if it's too much, it can make your symptoms worse significantly, where you feel agitated, irritated, high anxiety, stress, and that which leads into worse focus issues, worse motivation issues, complete burnout state. That's not what you want. And so if you look at this case study of a patient I had, that's exactly what they had. Their dopamine was too high. Their serotonin levels were too high. And their GABA levels were too high. And they were on medication. In fact, every time they were taking the medication, they felt more agitated and irritated because it was too much. And when something is too much, it can make things worse. You want to be here, nice and balanced. Just like with everything in life, you want some nice balance and consistency, not where you're all over the place. You want things too extreme, and you also don't want things too low. So those are two extreme reasons of why ADHD is not really just a dopamine problem. It can be a factor, but there are so many other things that it actually tends to be more of the issue, more of the problem from my experience. Another thing I want to point out here too is that, look here, let me get a different color here, highlighter. Right here, I want you to look real closely at this. What these are right here is what we call as cofactors. All the stuff that I'm highlighting right here, okay, are cofactors. Now, what are cofactors? Cofactors are, think of it as like whenever you bake a cake, it requires ingredients, right? And if you don't have those specific ingredients, it's hard to bake the cake. It's the same concept if you don't have these cofactors, also known as just different vitamins and minerals, micronutrients, to make like something like dopamine or serotonin or GABA. It requires these different ingredients, different micronutrients. So if you're deficient in that, that will make it very difficult to build and modulate, making these different neurotransmitters that are contributing to your ADHD symptoms that you're experiencing. Hence why it's not just a dopamine problem. and why it's like a very small piece of the puzzle of the whole picture here. So, when it comes to micronutrients, what are we specifically looking for? Well, there's different case studies. There's lots of things that I will typically see. And in a lot of cases, we'll see like B vitamins that are low, like this patient was, especially even like vitamin B6 is a big one that typically is a culprit to this whole situation, which is known as P5P, the activated form of vitamin B6, which, if that's deficient, it makes it very difficult for help in building serotonin and dopamine and also GABA. Okay. Now, some other things is also like vitamin D. So if we go back here, you can see vitamin D is right there. It's part of the dopamine pathway. So if you're low on vitamin D, it's going to make it very difficult from going from tyrosine to L-DOPA to dopamine to help in making your dopamine. This is why it's very important to not just look at just dopamine, and that it's like 10% or less of the issue that contributes to the whole picture. Okay. Some other things that also are really important to point out is other vitamins like vitamin K2, K1 and K2 that also can contribute to your cardiovascular health. Some other things that also can contribute to this, now, not in this case, but I'll sometimes we'll see zinc as well as magnesium as an issue, which are also really important for the neurotransmitter pathways. But with like this patient, their choline levels were low. It's an important metabolite that helps with memory. So if you're dealing with memory issues and this is low, it might be the reason why. Okay. Another thing to also really look at when it comes to micronutrient testing is looking at specifically different amino acids, additional amino acids like serine, which also contributes to memory issues. Also, glutamine, asparagine, all the different amino acids. If those are low, it's very common to see people with ADHD tend to be low in their amino acids because they're not getting enough protein in their diet. Also, CoQ10. I will see this a lot with adults with ADHD because not only are they dealing with severe symptoms of focus issues and motivation, but also low energy. And coenzyme Q10 tends to be deficient. And so we'll definitely have to catch that and treat that. Now, one other additional thing, omega-3s sometimes will be an issue. So just like this patient right here that I had, their EPA levels were low. So we want to make sure we catch that. And that's also really important when it comes to brain health. Okay. Another thing I want to also point out is when it comes to the digestive system. Just give me a second while I draw a very terrible digestive system. This is supposed to be large and small intestine. But why this is important is because if you are experiencing, and you let me know in the chat, if you experience any kind of like irritable bowel syndromes, gassing and bloating, let me know in the chat, because if you are experiencing this or you're constipated or have diarrhea or any kind of abdominal pain, you're probably having some digestive issues. And if that's the case, it makes it very difficult for processing and making different neurotransmitters, but also absorbing the nutrients like the micronutrients that we talked about, because 90 to 95% of a lot of our neurotransmitters are made in the gut. And if the gut's not working optimally, it's very hard to produce and make consistent different neurotransmitters, things such like dopamine, serotonin, and GABA, but also our body to absorb and utilize the different micronutrients that we were just discussing. So that's something that I put a pretty high emphasis with my patients that I work with, is that if there's issues here, we have to fix that. That's an absolute must. Okay. Now, I want to zoom in a lot more closer here because there's one other additional thing that's really important to look at when it comes to not just it being a dopamine issue, when it comes to your ADHD symptoms. And that is this right here. So remember we talked about cofactors. Cortisol is another one, especially when it comes to norepinephrine and epinephrine, which play a huge role when it comes to ADHD symptoms. And definitely not only can impact the pathway of dopamine, but it also can impact your energy and your focus throughout the day. And so when I'm looking at this, I want to specifically be running cortisol levels. So there's two situations that I will see. when I'm running this is looking at where it might be low. The cortisol levels are too low. And so therefore we have to improve that with different supplementation and also lifestyle treatments to improve those levels where it needs to be more in the green zone. Or it can be the opposite where it's too high and they're more stressed and therefore they can't focus. Their sleep is off, all sorts of different things when it comes to ADHD. And so then we have to help lower that where it needs to be more in the green zone. Okay. So that's something I also really kind of keep in mind. One other additional thing that I think is also really important to point out is how hormones can present similarly like ADHD symptoms. Let me explain. So like with this situation, when testosterone's low, like this patient of mine, you will feel low energy, but also brain fog can happen. And also focus can be off. Or like this patient, female, where the progesterone levels are low. And not only is their focus off, but their mood changes, they're irritable more. And so it can present making your ADHD symptoms even worse. So it's important to address that. Okay. So it's really, really important to understand that there's more to than just looking at just dopamine. And it requires investigative work. And this is how I'm able to get results from a patient's class, because we identify the root cause of the problem. And so if you would like me to be able to order these labs for you, I'd love to help you out, where I can order these labs for you so we can identify the root cause of the problem, because it does require that investigative work. So if you'd like to, you could book your first consultation with me. It's a 45-minute one-on-one personalized strategy session. All you got to do is just click on the link in the description below to be able to purchase and book that appointment. And hope to see you guys in the inside. Thank you guys so much for attending. I'll see you guys on the next live stream. Thanks. Bye.